Hello, and welcome to the Women in International Law Interest Group Prominent Women in International Law program. My name is Nienke Grossman, and I am a professor at the University of Baltimore School of Law and co-chair of ASIL's Women in International Law Interest Group. On behalf of myself, co-chair Milena Stereo, and the WILIG Steering Committee, I am happy to welcome you to the WILIG Annual Meeting Program. WILIG's mission is to promote and enhance the careers of women in the field of international law, as well as to promote awareness of gender and international law. We have been busy working toward our mission this year through a number of activities, including our mentoring program, which is moving online, and we encourage you to join as either a mentee or a mentor. The creation of a new scholarship prize to highlight and promote excellence in international law scholarship involving women and girls, gender and feminist approaches, and co-sponsored events and panels, including a breakfast last summer with the Minorities in International Law Interest Group. And of course, today we are honored to celebrate a prominent woman in international law, Judge Alicja Benito. Before we dive into our formal program for today, we would like to take a moment to thank Luli Hemmingson, the mentoring program coordinator, Tati Sainadi, WILIG's secretary, and WILIG's entire steering committee for their commitment and dedication to WILIG in the past year. We would also like to express our gratitude to ASIL's leadership and staff, including Mark, Wes, Ben, and Jimmy, among others, for their thoughtful engagement and partnership with us at every step of the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Milena Stereo. I'm also co-chair of the WILIG, the Women in International Law Interest Group at the American Society of International Law, and it is truly a pleasure to be here virtually today. Usually we would ask all of our participants to go around the table and introduce themselves. That is unfortunately not possible today in this format. Nonetheless, we encourage all of you to introduce yourselves through the chat function. So if you'd like to do so, please chat for everyone, your name, your affiliation, and please feel free to say hello to all of your friends who might be participating. It is now my pleasure to introduce Catherine Amerfar, who is the newly elected president of the American Society of International Law. She's also a litigation partner and co-chair of the Public International Law Group at the law firm of Debevoise and Plimpton. Catherine will deliver a few brief remarks, and then we will move on with the rest of the program. So Catherine, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I have the very happy privilege of extending a warm welcome on behalf of the Society. I want to start by just thanking Milena and thanking Nienke for organizing this event and for all that they and WILIG do throughout the year to increase opportunities for women in international law. Obviously, a cause that's near and dear to my heart. The WILIG Lunch is one of our most cherished annual meeting traditions. I recall when I first started attending the Society annual meetings, now admittedly over 20 years ago, I was really touched and impressed by the special place of honor that WILIG had created, as well as the opportunity to interact with so many brilliant women in the field of international law. I'm so happy to see WILIG carrying on the program, even when the lunch takes on a whole new meaning in the virtual setting in which we find ourselves. Also of great significance is the illustrious history of the Prominent Women International Law Award. The award was first presented 27 years ago in 1993. On the Society's website, you will find a list of the previous winners, which paints an absolutely extraordinary picture of the contributions of women throughout the decades. It's just something that I think I'm so glad that we take these moments to pause on. And even if we can't do what I loved, which is the go around to describe ourselves to each other, I hope the chats will be robust because it really is one of my favorite events. And with that, I will return the floor back to Milena and Ninke to introduce this year's illustrious recipient, Judge Alicja Benito, with my own very warm congratulations. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Catherine. As you may know, the Prominent Woman in International Law Award is given each year to an individual who has advanced women, gender, or women's rights in international law. The Willig Subcommittee on the Prominent Woman in International Law Prize selected Judge Alicja Benito because of her long and distinguished career in international law and her extensive and important contributions to human rights, including women's rights in academia, government, the United Nations, and international courts. Remarkably, she has served on 3 different international courts, including the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the inaugural bench of the International Criminal Court, and currently as president of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, where she's the only woman on the 7-member bench. In fact, she recently issued a public call to states to nominate women judges to that court. Judge Alicja Benito has made significant and important contributions to the jurisprudence of these courts, for example, by demanding that Yugoslavia tribunal prosecutors include gender crimes and sexual violence charges in their indictments, and by pushing for the adoption of specific rules of procedure and evidence in order to prevent the intimidation and harassment of victims and witnesses of sexual crimes. In her home country of Costa Rica, she held numerous high positions in government, including as Vice President, Minister of Justice, Attorney General, and Minister of the Environment and Energy. Judge Alicja Benito also served as Ambassador and Permanent Representative to the United Nations and Ambassador and Chief of Delegation to the 1993 United Nations World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna. She's also a member of the Costa Rican National Group of the Permanent Court of Arbitration. In addition, Judge Alicja Benito was a member of the United Nations Subcommission on Prevention of Discrimination and Protection of Minorities and its special rapporteur on the topic of the elimination of all forms of intolerance and of discrimination on grounds of religion or belief. She also served on the expert committee for the prevention of torture in the Americas and was elected chairman rapporteur of the working group on the draft optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, which was adopted in 2002 by the United Nations General Assembly. She's currently a professor emerita at the University of Costa Rica, where she served as vice president of the University for Academic Affairs and published extensively in the human rights realm. Her recognitions and awards are numerous, and they include an honorary degree from the University of Costa Rica and nomination as a Peace Woman by the Peace Women Across the Globe Initiative. She received her first degree from the University of Costa Rica and did postgraduate work in gender studies. We are honored to welcome her to the American Society of International Law to receive this recognition here today.
So I'm sure that we are all clapping in our various locations to celebrate Judge Alicja Benito. This is the award that we will be sharing with her. We will be delivering to her shortly, and we're very excited to do that. Judge Alicja Benito has kindly agreed to engage in a conversation with us, followed by Q&A from the audience if time so allows. But first, we're going to give her a chance to deliver some brief remarks before we turn to the Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I really touched for all you said about me. Dear members of Women in International Law Group, dear President and friends, I feel very honored in being the latest recipient of this prestigious award given to prominent women in international law. I am in excellent company with previous women who have also spent their lives dedicated to advocate for gender justice and human rights. As we know, we have come a long way, as the saying says, but we also have a long way to go. Awards such as this one gives me even more motivation to continue a job that has and will be part of my life forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Judge Odio Benito. Again, I'm sure we're all clapping in our own locations. So we will now dive into the moderated question and answer portion of the program. And we are a multilingual group, so we are going to have Judge Elizabeth Odio Benito is going to respond to questions in Spanish, and they'll be interpreted simultaneously. Judge Odio Benito, one of the many remarkable aspects of your career is your service on a number of different international courts, including the ICTY, the International Criminal Court, and now the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. As our listeners may know, many international court benches and other international bodies continue to be homogeneous in terms of their composition. For example, you are the only woman currently serving on the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Other groups, such as minorities within their home states, disabled individuals, indigenous people, and sexual minorities also appear to be severely underrepresented or absent from international justice. Does this matter? What needs to change to increase the diversity of the international bench?
Es fundamental.
It is
Es absolutamente
fundamentally important.
la presencia de las
Absolutely
mujeres
crucial
en
to
los
have women
tribunales
on
nacionales e
national,
internacionales.
domestic, and international
No solo
benches.
de las mujeres,
Not only
también
women,
de todos estos
it is
grupos
also
que no pueden
important to
seguir
have
siendo
all of these
discriminados,
groups that cannot continue to be discriminated
que es
against,
una de los
which
ideales de la
is
Declaración Universal de los
one
Derechos
of
Humanos.
the ideals
Es
enshrined in the
fundamental y sin
Declaration
embargo,
of Human Rights.
tantos años han pasado,
It's
tantos
fundamentally
han
important.
pasado,
However, so
y
many
seguimos
years have gone
siendo
by, so many
unas minorías
fights,
discriminadas.
and we continue to
Las
be
mujeres, los
discriminated
indígenas,
against as minorities,
la
women,
población afro,
indigenous peoples,
los discapacitados,
people of African descent,
los grupos de
disabled
diferente
persons,
orientación
people with
sexual.
disabilities, and people with different
Es
sexual orientations.
todavía inaceptable ver
It is
cómo
unacceptable
las
still
mujeres
to
estamos
see how
ausentes
women are still
de
absent
los más importantes
from
tribunales
the most
internacionales
important
y
international
nacionales.
and
Hasta no
domestic
hace
courts.
mucho tiempo,
Until
la
recently,
Corte Internacional de
at
Justicia,
the
el gran tribunal
International
creado por la
Court of
Carta de las
Justice,
Naciones Unidas, no tenía
created
mujeres.
by the
Finalmente
UN
llegó
Charter,
una
there were no
brillantísima
women
jurista,
on the bench.
Rosalind
Finally,
Higgins,
a brilliant
además
jurist,
es,
Rosalind
recibió también
Higgins,
el
came,
premio con el que
and
ustedes
she
hoy
has
me
also
honran.
been a
Hoy en
recipient
día,
of
hoy
this
día hay
award that you're
tres,
honoring me
un
with
grupo de
today.
15.
Today,
En
there are
la
3 out of
Corte
15
Africana
judges
de Derechos
who are
Humanos
women.
hay
The
un
African
poco
Court
más
of
de
Human Rights
equilibrio.
is a
En la
bit
Corte
more
Penal
balanced.
Internacional
The International Criminal Court
hay una tercera parte de mujeres,
has a
que fue
third
una
of its
cuota,
judges
y sobre
who
las
are women
cuotas
judges.
hay que
So,
siempre
and
tener
it's
la
a quota,
atención
and
puesta, porque son
you
importantes, porque
always
trabajan.
have to pay
Cuando el
attention to that.
Estatuto de
They're
Roma se
important.
estaba
When
redactando en
the
Roma, en el
Statute
año
of Rome
98,
was
más de
being
2,000
written
organizaciones de
in
mujeres
Rome,
que estuvieron allí
more than
presentes
2,000 women's
pelearon a
organizations were
muerte,
there,
hubo que pelear a
and
muerte
they fought
para que se incluyera
nail into
un
to
tercio,
have
por lo menos,
at least
de
a
mujeres.
third of the judges be
La
women.
primera vez que se nombraron los 18
The first
jueces,
time
fuimos
the
7
18
mujeres.
judges were appointed,
Entre
there were
ellas,
7 women.
2 africanas, una
African
sudafricana,
women, 1 South African
latinoamericanas,
woman,
porque así están dados
and
los
Latin
grupos
Americans,
regionales
because
de
that's the way
Naciones
the
Unidas.
regional groups
Y
are
desde
represented
entonces
at the UN.
se volvió al
Since
tercio
then,
de mujeres, nunca se
they
ha
have
pasado de
gone
allí
back to a
y
third. It's never
no
been
sé si
more than a
algún día se
third
logrará avanzar.
of women on the bench, and I do
En
not
la Corte
know whether that
Interamericana de
hurdle will
Derechos
be
Humanos, la
overcome ever.
vergüenza es
At the
todavía mayor,
Inter-American Court of Human Rights,
porque en 40 años
we
de
should be even
funcionamiento de
more
la Corte,
ashamed, because over 40
solamente
years
hemos sido
of
5
existence,
las
there have only
mujeres
been 5 women judges on the bench as compared to 34 men. Out of those 5, only 2 of us have been president. Judge Cecilia Medina, who was also a recipient of this award, and myself. And when I was appointed, I was told at the OAS General Assembly that I was the sole woman, and for 2 or 3 terms there it had been an all-male court. And at the ICTY, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, out of 11 judges they had at first, only 2 were women. Judge McDonald from the US, an African American, who has been a sister to me since then, and myself were the only 2 woman judges in that group that worked relentlessly to put on the map of this court those crimes committed against women. More women came later after us, but for the first few years, Ed McDonald and myself had to fight very hard against some colleagues who didn't really understand the situation. And that's also very important for us to bear in mind. We need to have women, but that's not enough. We need to provide a gender perspective, but we also need men who are in a position to join us in these fights, in these struggles. It is very important, therefore, for us to be reminded of why we have fought so hard, we women, to be on these courts, and why we keep fighting for other minorities to also have a seat there. It's incredible that at an inter-American court, there are no people from indigenous peoples. There are no African people of African descent. No people with disabilities on the bench. So these are major struggles, and we have fought them, and we will continue to fight for those ideals. Thank you for your question, and thank you for letting me express this and say how important it is, how incredibly important it is for women to participate on all the courts, domestic and international.
Thank you. Here's our next question to you. Many of these international tribunals have also addressed the challenge of violence against women and children. Unfortunately, this is a massive public health problem which has been aggravated during the COVID-19 pandemic, which we're all experiencing. During your career, what moments stand out to you as particularly significant in addressing the rise of violence against women and children, and why? What are the most important steps that remain to be taken or issues that remain unresolved?
At this difficult juncture of the COVID-19 pandemic, what came to the fore due to the pandemic is that we do not just have to face the pandemic, but also, and once again, the pandemic of violence against women. These steps taken by the international community and by national states separately made it clear that by staying at home, locking ourselves up due to the pandemic, the violence against women has been exacerbated to unprecedented level against women and children. This pandemic also made apparent the terrible social and financial inequalities in our societies. In the fight for showing and giving visibility to violence against women and giving it the importance it does have, and not only in the area of justice, but throughout society in all walks of life. In 1993, I was in Vienna when women went to Vienna to stand for women's rights as human rights. And some people are still not very convinced of that. It was a very important watershed moment because that is when I met women who had been the victims of all types of violence at in the war which was still raging in the former Yugoslavia. That was a very important time in my life. The other one was at the ICTY, where together with Judge McDonald, and as I said before, we together with another fighter, Patty Sellers was also a fighter for all of these issues. We brought to the table the issue of violence against women, and we during those first few years we were lucky to have a very intelligent general prosecutor, Richard Gorstein, who was very supportive of our fight to have violence, sexual violence against women, to be considered an international crime, and that rape, which was not on the list of crimes on the statute of the tribunal of the court, to be included under the umbrella of torture. That was very important, extremely important, because that is when we started to work on the idea of crimes against humanity and war crimes, which now include crimes involving sexual violence against women, as is the case of the Rome Statute. So those were very important moments in my life and my career. And if I may, I'd also like to say that one of the main reasons why I'm still in this fight is that on a daily basis, we see violence against women. Violence is not something that you're born with. It is something you learn. People learn, they become violent. They learn it at home, in their families. Children, boys and girls, are educated differently, they're brought up differently, and they witness domestic violence at home, and they suffer from it. They are victims of domestic violence and then reproduce it. They become violent themselves. Violence is the main element leading to discrimination against women and minorities. And violence has been exacerbated during this pandemic of COVID-19 to incredible, never before seen levels. And this should be a matter of great concern for governments. In early April at the court, we issued a very important declaration. It was the first time in the history of the court where there was a declaration entitled Human Rights and COVID-19, where states' attention was drawn to the fact that whenever measures were to be taken to face the pandemic, that fundamental rights be taken into account and upheld for all persons, for those who are incarcerated, for women, for all minorities, the rights to freedom of expression, freedom of the press. This declaration, which has been pivotal and was followed by several roundtable discussions presided over by the judges of the court, the importance of governments addressing the issue of human rights in respect of fundamental rights has been brought to the fore. It is up to the governments to include women, to appoint women, to nominate them to courts, and also members of all of the other minority groups that I just mentioned. This is crucial. And now that the pandemic is still going on, it has not yet ended yet. And On top of that, we have seen how, as countries have opened up, have been opening up their economies due to their deteriorating economies, there has been a pickup in violence, an increase in violence and in contagion as well. We do not know what the effects of this pandemic will be on the poorer of the poor, on women, and on all others. It is the responsibility of the governments, but it does not fall just on the government's shoulders to do that. It is up to all of us to do everything within our power to fight this situation that is so harmful to all of us.
Thank you very much, Judge Alicja Benito, for those very important and thoughtful remarks. We are living in an entirely new world, and this pandemic is exacerbating all kinds of inequalities that were already there and bringing to light new ones. So your remarks are very helpful to all of us as we think about the impact of the pandemic and the disparate impact of the pandemic. So before I ask another question, I want to take a moment to encourage all of you who are out there listening to this program to send in some of your own questions that we will be able to bring to light and ask Judge Alicja Benito to respond to. We won't be able to do all of them, but we'll be able to do some. So we encourage you to send in some additional questions. So Judge Alicja Benito, as I mentioned at the beginning of this event, WILLIG is very proud of its mentoring program and what it is doing to help further the careers of young women starting out in and you have made many different kinds of contributions to international law and international justice. And we thought that among the people who are watching today, there may be many who would be interested in learning from you based on your career and experiences. What advice would you provide to young women as they embark on this adventure of international law careers? Thank you.
Para la justicia penal internacional,
for international
para
criminal law,
internacional de los derechos
for
humanos,
international human
para el
rights law,
derecho internacional en
for
general, es
international law in general, it is
absolutamente crucial
absolutely
contar
crucial
con
and
nosotras,
vital
las
to
mujeres.
have women involved.
Contar con las mujeres jóvenes.
Young women.
Las mujeres jóvenes
Young women
están llenas de entusiasmo, que
who
están
are
llenas de
full of
esperanza,
enthusiasm and hope and commitment.
para contribuir a
They're
hacer
fully committed
de sus
to
vidas y de las vidas de sus
contributing
familias y
to
de las
making
vidas
their
de sus
lives, their
sociedades,
families' lives, their societies' lives
sociedades más justas, más equitativas,
fairer,
discriminantes,
more
o no
equitable,
discriminantes del todo, por Dios.
non-discriminating
Tenemos que
societies, please.
comprometernos en esta lucha que,
We need to
que
be
vean
committed
que
and
no
engaged in
se
this
termina
fight.
tan fácilmente,
It will not
porque
end that easily.
es parte de la
And people
tarea
need
que
to
tenemos
understand
por delante,
that that's
es
part of our job
trabajar
ahead of
juntos
us
con
is to work together
todos los miembros de nuestra
with
familia, con todos los
all
miembros de
of our
nuestra
family
sociedad,
members
con todos los
and the
miembros
members of
de
our
nuestras
society
comunidades académicas,
and
en
academic
una
communities
tarea que hasta ahora ha sido
and
avanzado. No digo que no, pero
and do a
avanza
job
lentamente,
where we have been
es
making progress
llevar
slowly
a la
but surely,
conciencia,
which is
llevar
to create
a la
awareness
inteligencia de
for people
todos
to
la necesidad
understand
absoluta
that there is
de
a
que para
need, a
tener un
vital
mundo mejor,
need,
sobre todo ahora
that
después de esta
for
pandemia.
us to have a better
Esta
world,
pandemia que
especially
no
after
ha
this
hecho más que
pandemic,
poner, como
which
decía Ninke,
has only, as Ninke said,
claramente las
brought to
discriminaciones,
light
las injusticias,
discrimination,
las inequidades.
injustice, inequality, disparities.
Si no trabajamos en esto,
Unless we do
la
that,
sociedad va a seguir
unless we
siendo
work on this,
terriblemente inequitativa, terriblemente
society will continue
injusta.
to be
Por eso
terribly
es que es tan importante ese compromiso.
unequal
Por eso es que es tan
and
importante
unfair. That
esa
is why that
convicción
commitment
que
and
tenemos que tener
conviction
de
is so
nuestras
important.
responsabilidades,
We
de
need to
llevar
be
adelante
aware and
la
convinced
tarea
of our
hacia los
responsibility, which
gobiernos,
is
hacia las academias,
to
hacia las
take
familias,
this
hacia las
and do
sociedades,
this job
de que
with academia, with our families,
tenemos
with
que
our
llevar
societies.
nuestra perspectiva de
We
género.
need to
Tenemos que
bring
hacer
our gender
entender que
perspective to
hombres y
them. We need
mujeres
to make people
somos
understand that men
diferentes,
and
pero
women are
no somos
different,
igualmente poderosos
but
y que
we're
al
not
no compartir
equally
el poder en
powerful.
igualdad de
And
circunstancias, nosotras
when we do
siempre
not
vamos a
share
ser
in power
discriminadas.
on
Es
an equal footing, we
la
will always
perspectiva de
be
género,
uh,
esa perspectiva
discriminated
de género
against.
que la
Gender
Corte de
perspective, that
Yugoslavia
gender
introdujo
perspective, which was
y que la
introduced
Corte
by the
Interamericana
Court
de
for the
Derechos
former
Humanos ha
Yugoslavia
desarrollado
and that the
enormemente. Esa
Inter-American
perspectiva de
Court
género que
Human
permite
Rights has
entender
developed
que
over
los
the
hombres y las
years
mujeres
is what
somos
enables us
impactados,
to understand that men and women
pero el
are
impacto
both
no
affected,
repercute igual en
but
nuestras vidas.
not
El
equally.
impacto que sufren los
The
hombres y
effects
el
on our
impacto que
lives are
sufrimos las
different
mujeres
as
es
men and
diferente.
women.
Y esas diferencias
And
son
those
las que tienen que
differences
llevarnos
need
a luchar por
to
eliminarlas, por
galvanize us, to
hacernos
fight,
realmente
to eliminate those
lo que somos.
disparities,
Seres
to
libres e
turn us
iguales,
into what
como
we
dice la
really
Declaración
are,
Universal, en dignidad y derechos.
free
Porque la
and
dignidad
equal
que
beings in
establece el
dignity
artículo
and
primero de
rights,
la
because
Declaración Universal,
dignity enshrined
esa
in
igual
Article
dignidad
1
y
of the
libertad
Universal
y
Declaration,
derechos es
we need dignity
el,
and equality and
esta
dignity and
bandera que
rights.
nunca
It's
debemos
a
olvidar, es
banner
este
that we should
paradigma al
never
cual tenemos que
stop
dedicarnos. Y creo que
remembering. It's a
encontrando
paradigm that we need
con
to devote ourselves
organizaciones
to.
como la de
And
ustedes,
with organizations and through
como
organizations
organizaciones
like
como
your
ustedes que
own,
han dedicado muchos años
which
a este
have
tipo de trabajo,
devoted
vamos a ir
years and years
avanzando,
of
vamos
work
a ir progresando.
to
Yo
this,
quiero
we will continue to move forward. So
felicitarlas.
I would like to
Yo quiero
congratulate
decirles de
you.
nuevo que me
Once
siento muy
again,
orgullosa
let me
de
reiterate
que me
how
hayan
proud
dado
I
este
am
premio,
for
que me habría encantado verlas
receiving
en Washington, que
this
tal vez
award.
algún
I would
día
have loved to see you in
pronto
person in
pueda
Washington.
ir yo
Hopefully, we
a
will meet
Washington
again
a
soon. I will
saludarlas
be
allá,
able
a
to come to
saludarlos allá,
Washington
pero
to greet you there.
alentarlas
And I
a
would
que
like
sigan
to
trabajando como
encourage you to
lo han
continue to
venido
work hard
haciendo
as you
todos
have
estos años
over
y
the
que
years.
las
And
Thank you so much, Judge Odio Benito. If I may, could I ask a follow-up question in response to your comments? I would be interested. You talked a little bit about the gender lens, and the sort of the gender perspective in and how we apply it, and how important it is to apply it and to think about it. I was wondering if you could speak to this critique that about essentialism, that not all women are the same, that we have women from all different backgrounds and histories and experiences in the world. How would you respond to that? I don't know if it's a critique, but at least a comment on the idea that a gender perspective exists.
Sí, las mujeres somos diferentes.
women are indeed different.
Las mujeres somos diferentes.
We are different.
Tenemos
from each other.
diferentes procedencias.
We come from different places, from different ethnic groups and social classes, economic classes, and we come from different countries.
Las mujeres
Women of African
tienen
descent
una diferente
have
historia,
a different history,
muy cruel.
very cruel, by the way.
Ahora, en estos días, precisamente, he vuelto a
Recently,
sentirme militante
I once again became an advocate for the fact that Black and brown lives matter, because it is very important for us, all of us, to join forces. and
el trabajar juntas.
working together, joining forces,
trabajar juntas en empresas comunes.
Working together towards a common goal
muchísimo.
Brings us together.
El sentarnos y conversar.
Getting together
sobre nuestros problemas.
And discussing our problems.
Sobre las dificultades que enfrentamos.
Discussing the difficulties that we face. Little by little, we realize through these exercises that women,
fíjense,
and here, regardless of skin color, we are the poorest. And that is always the case. It is always women who are in the poorest swaths of the population. We are the ones who get paid less for our work, whose political rights are not as recognized. And this is true across the board in every community. This is the inequality, the discrimination that brings us together. And that is where we find that common background for us to work together. Why are we poorer? Why do they pay us less? Why have international organizations, financial organizations, been saying for years that to lift people out of poverty, you need to give women the ability, the training to lift themselves out of poverty, to be involved, to work, to be on the work market, on the labor market on an equal footing. And because that is not done, poverty is perpetuated, and we continue to be the ones who suffer the most violations of our rights because we're the most discriminated against. That's what I would like to tell all of our young women students from around the world, no matter where they come from. Come together, work together, talk to each other. Don't let anything come between you.
Okay, so at this time, we would like to move to questions from the audience. And we actually have several questions from Judge Gabrielle Kirk McDonald. So let me read to you her questions because I think they're excellent, really important, and I'm sure you will be glad to answer her questions.
Absolutely.
So she has asked you the following. First, in your experience, why do you believe that women are particularly suited for judgeships in trials of mass violence? Then she also asked you, would you advise young women to consider a career in international criminal law now that the era of ad hoc tribunals is over and the United States has not signed on to the ICC? And that how did your gender serve you well within the ICTY?
Gaby. Qué emoción me da.
I'm so moved by the fact that you're here. You're there listening.
¿Qué fue lo que preguntó Gaby? Could you
question
please,
just slipped my mind.
Repeat me the Gaby's questions, please.
One at a time.
Okay, so first question, and apologies for that very compound and leading question, bad lawyering on my behalf.
Don't worry.
First question.
Say it again.
Yes, first question. In your experience, why do you believe that women are particularly suited for judgeships in trials of mass violence?
Okay. Porque nosotras, Gaby,
because, Gaby,
las mujeres,
we, women,
una gran capacidad de
have
empatía.
the ability to empathize. We're able to put ourselves in the victim's shoes. We have this huge ability to understand our colleagues. We have this wonderful ability also to
nuestros puntos de vista, para
to
no tener miedo.
Drive home our points of view, not to be afraid. We are courageous. in the
en
United
donde
States,
la lucha por los
where
derechos
the fight
civiles
for civil
de
rights
los afroamericanos
of
ha
African
sido tan
Americans
dura.
has been so
Usted
harsh.
estuvo en primera línea
You were
en
on the
esa
front
lucha.
line in that
¿Por qué?
fight.
Por esa valentía,
Why?
por ese
Because
coraje
you're brave,
que en
you're
esos
courageous,
aspectos
and
sobrepasamos muchas veces
that's
a
where
los hombres.
oftentimes
No nos da
we
miedo luchar,
rise above
porque
men.
somos
We are not
empáticos,
afraid to
porque
fight
tenemos
because we
unos
have
sentimientos que nos
empathy,
hacen
we have
entender
sympathy, we
mejor
have
a
feelings
nosotros
that
mismos,
makes it
a nuestros
easier
compañeros y
for
al
us
mundo.
to understand ourselves, our colleagues, and the world.
¿Qué otra cosa preguntó? What
What
is the
else
next
did she
question?
ask?
Yes, she also asked about your advice to young women and whether young women today should consider a career in international criminal law now that the era of the ad hoc tribunals is over and the United States has not only not signed on to the ICC, but has been incredibly hostile to the ICC over the past, I want to say, week or so.
Bueno, sí. La justicia penal internacional
International criminal law
nunca ha sido la más popular
has never been the most
entre los
popular
gobiernos o entre las
amongst
comunidades
governments or international communities.
Cuando empezamos,
When we
Gaby,
started
en el ICTY,
working at the ICTY, Gabi,
recordarás que
you will recall
teníamos
that
el apoyo
we had the
de
backing
algunos gobiernos,
of some governments,
pero teníamos la enemistad de muchos otros
but
gobiernos.
we were also
En ese
disliked
momento
by many
tuvimos
other governments. At the time,
realmente
we
tuvimos la oportunidad
we
de contar en el gobierno
were
de los Estados Unidos de América,
we had the opportunity at the time,
que
or
con una
with
mujer, Madeleine
the
Albright,
of having Madeleine
apoyó
Albright in the
muchísimo
U.S.
el trabajo
government.
del
She was a
ICTY.
woman who was really supportive
Gracias
of
a
the
ella
work done
logramos
by ICTY.
progresar. Y
By the ICTY. That's thanks to
como
her, we
el
were able to
trabajo
make
del
headway.
ICTY
And
demostró que la
as
justicia
the
penal
ICTY's
internacional
work
puede ser
showed that
objetiva, puede ser
international criminal
profesional,
law can be
puede ser
objective,
independiente.
professional,
Se
unbiased,
logró
independent.
en el año 98 aprobar el
In
Estatuto de Roma
1998,
y
the
darle
Statute of
vida
Rome
a la Corte Penal
was
Internacional.
enacted, was approved,
En
thus
esta Corte
creating
Penal
the
Internacional
International
hay, y
Criminal Court.
seguirá habiendo, y por eso
At
son
the
importantes las
ICC,
cuotas,
and
una cuota
this is
en
why
donde
quotas are important,
siempre
there
habrá
is and there will
juezas,
continue to be a quota
juezas
for
mujeres.
women judges,
Pero
women
la
judges.
justicia penal internacional
But
no es la
international
única
criminal
justicia penal que
law
puede atraer
is
a
not
las
the
jóvenes
only type of
abogadas.
criminal
Están
law that
todas
could
las justicias
attract young
internas
women
en
lawyers. There
los
are
tribunales,
different
que por ejemplo en los Estados Unidos
domestic
culmina
courts
con la Corte
in the United
Suprema,
States, leading all the way up to the
donde
Supreme
las
Court
mujeres han jugado un
of
papel
Justice, where
importantísimo
women
en
have
su
had a
práctica.
very important
Es
role to play and will continue to do so.
camino de las
It
legislaciones
is
nacionales, de la justicia
through
nacional.
national
Y en la
domestic
justicia
legislation
penal
and domestic
internacional,
justice.
es cierto que se cerraron los tribunales ad hoc,
It is
pero
true that ad
también
hoc
se han abierto
courts and
otros,
tribunals
se
have
han
ended,
abierto
have been
otros.
closed in
Te
the
habrás
international
enterado
sphere, but new
de
ones
que
have been
recientemente
created. You must have
se
heard that
dictó
recently
una orden de apremio
an
contra un
order was issued
general kosovar
against
que
a
es
Kosovar
el
general.
presidente de Kosovo.
He is the
La
president
justicia
of Kosovo.
penal
So
internacional
international
es
criminal
lenta.
law is
No
slow.
siempre camina a la velocidad
It
que uno
does not
quisiera.
necessarily
Y hay
work at the
tribunales que se han
speed that
cerrado,
one
pero
would
hay
have liked.
otros
And some
que
courts have been
se
closed
han
down, but others
abierto. Y
have
además,
sprouted up
insisto
and
en
have been
que,
created.
dado que la violencia
And
contra la mujer es
I
muy
insist
importante,
that
todas
in
las
view of
violencias,
violence
todas
against
las
women, which is
violaciones
so
que se
important
cometen contra las
and so
mujeres
terrible,
en las
all
sociedades
violence, all types of violence,
nacionales
rape,
tienen que llegar a la justicia.
and human
Para
rights
eso es muy
violations,
importante
women's
contar
rights
con mujeres.
have to be
No
brought to
solo
justice, and that's why
en la
we need
justicia
women there,
penal
and
internacional.
not only in international criminal law.
Había otra pregunta. I think
There was
there
another
more.
question.
Here's the last question from Judge Kirk McDonald. how have the sexual violence rules of procedure adopted by the Yugoslavia Tribunal helped with the work of the ICC?
Todo el trabajo que hicimos en la
The work
jurisprudencia
that we
del
did
ICTY,
at the
todas las
ICTY,
sentencias
it's
que se
all of
dictaron
its
que
case law,
incluyeron
the
la
judgments
violencia
that were
sexual
returned, and including
como crímenes de guerra
sexual
y
violence
en el
as
caso
war crimes,
del Tribunal de Ruanda,
and in the
como un elemento de
Rwanda,
genocidio.
the court of
Todas
Rwanda,
esas
as an element,
sentencias
as part of
fueron
genocide,
muy
all of these
importantes,
judgments were
muy
very
importantes
important
para la redacción del Estatuto de
to
Roma,
the
para que los
development of
artículos
the
respectivos
Rome Statute,
de
so
los
that
crímenes de guerra
the
y de los crímenes
articles
de lesa
on
humanidad
war crimes and crimes against
se
humanity,
incluyera la violencia
there
sexual.
be
Eso se
sexual
debe
violence
al
included.
trabajo del
This
ICTY.
is thanks to the work done by the
Claro que
ICTY.
en la Corte
Of course,
Penal Internacional,
at
en
the
el ICC,
at the ICC, the International Criminal Court,
el trabajo que esa Corte ha hecho hasta ahora
the work that has been
en
done
esta
by the
materia
ICC thus
ha
far in that
defraudado
regard
mucho.
has been
Yo lo hablo a nombre propio. Las
quite
expectativas que
disappointing.
teníamos
And I'll just say
no
it
ha
outright.
sido
It hasn't lived up
incorporar
to our
esta
expectations.
violencia en las
This
sentencias
type of
de la
violence has
Corte.
not been included
Eh,
into the
En los
ICC's
primeros años de
judgments.
la Corte en que yo
During the
estuve ahí,
first few years
intentamos
of
trabajar mucho
work of that court
para
where
que los
I was on the
jueces
bench, we really
fueran
worked hard for
entendiendo
judges to
toda la importancia,
understand,
pero no tuvimos
to be
mucho
aware of the
éxito.
importance of
Sin
this issue,
embargo,
but
ha habido
to no
sentencias
avail. However,
en
there have
donde se ha
been
recogido los
judgments
crímenes de
where
violencia
these
sexual
crimes involving
y mi
violence,
esperanza
sexual
es
violence,
que en los
have
años que
been
siguen,
included.
y por eso es muy
And my
importante
hope is that
estimular a
into the
nuestros
future,
jóvenes
and that's why we need to encourage
profesionales,
our young women
lleguen a esta
professionals
corte más
to
juezas, lleguen a esta
to
corte más
strive
mujeres
for
comprometidas
becoming
con
judges
este
on that
tipo
court and having more women committed
de jurisprudencia
to
con,
this type
con la
of
gravedad de estos crímenes para poder
jurisdictional
seguir
work,
adelante.
and due to the seriousness of these crimes.
Thank you very much. It's interesting to note that the percentage of women on the ICC bench has actually declined in the last period. So it's particularly important to think about retaining advances. And in the Inter-American system, in the Inter-American court, at one point also there were 3 women judges on the bench, and that has also declined. So it's wonderful to hear your advocacy of the importance of including women's voices. There's also a question from Monica Pinto, who you mentioned. So I think many of your friends are listening and clapping.
All of them, I think.
in many far-flung locations. And she asks if you could tell us how you succeeded. So now we're moving to a success in international law and jurisprudence. So if you could tell us how you succeeded in establishing a new gender approach at the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, especially in cases like IV versus Bolivia. And maybe you could give a little bit of background about that case for those who aren't aware of it.
Gracias. Thank you for that question.
Y un cariñoso saludo también para Mónica.
I would also like to warmly greet Monica. She's one of my friends and sister with whom I have walked along many of these paths. There have been many things that have happened over the last few years. One of them, as you may recall, is the Me Too movement, which has been replicated in our countries, which has led to more complaints, to more reports, has lent more visibility to abuse against women and children, girls, and against murders of women, which continue to occur. And unfortunately, and I'm going to talk about Latin America, our region, but it is not solely in Latin America that they occur. At the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, over the last few years, we've succeeded in issuing very important judgments in terms of the gender approach and perspective, and lending more visibility to crimes committed against women, all types of crimes, not just physical violence or psychological violence, but also in terms of sexual and reproductive rights. As part of its work, the court has dealt with very important matters, such as a court order forcing the government of Costa Rica to open artificial IVF clinics that had been closed down by the government, and the Inter-American Court said this is a fundamental human right that women are entitled to, that couples are entitled to, families are entitled to, so reopen those clinics and offer women in Costa Rica the chance to have children via in vitro fertilization. Currently, we are celebrating the 5th birth of a baby, of an IVF baby from that clinic, because sexual and reproductive rights of women were placed, were given their right place as a fundamental right. In the judgment that Monica mentioned, what happened was that there was a lady who, she was a migrant or refugee or an exile in Bolivia. So she went to a hospital. It was a women's hospital. And she went in. She had a problem, a gynecological problem, and so she went in for care. She went to doctors, not just one, but more than one. She had 2 or 3 daughters, and she wanted to have a boy because that's what her partner wanted, a boy. But then the physicians decided that since while she was under anesthesia, they were going to sterilize her, just like that. And they sterilized her. That was an act of violence. It was a grotesque violation of human rights and this woman's sexual and reproductive freedom. Of course, that wrecked her life. And she was able to bring her case to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. And at the court, with its current composition, I have colleagues on the bench who are very sympathetic and are very and have a spirit of solidarity towards the rights of women and children and minorities. So together with them, we were able to work on this judgment, IV versus Bolivia, which has become one of our landmark cases in turning women's rights what they are, human rights. And so with these colleagues, and as Monica is very much aware, we issued an advisory opinion at the behest of the government of Costa Rica, uh, AO 24, recognizing the rights of minorities who have different sexual orientations and the equality in terms of rights and dignity for all human rights. Therefore, in Costa Rica, we now have same sex marriage. And that is thanks to the case law of this court, the Inter-American Court. That's why I feel very glad that towards the end of my career on the bench, I have been able to serve on the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, in spite of being the only woman. And this is very important. It's important to have intelligent men and sensitive men as colleagues. It, I have I am glad to have been shared the bench with colleagues who have made this advisory opinion and judgment possible. Thank you. Thank you, Monica. Greetings.
We are nearing the end of the program. We have about 5 minutes left. So we have time, I think, for one or perhaps two more questions. So I have a question from Dilaram Farzane, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, but it's a great question. And here's the question. Dear Judge Benito, would you please share one incident when you were challenged because you were a woman and how you tackled it?
Bueno, siendo muy joven, siendo
When I
una,
was very young,
una joven profesional,
I was a young professional woman,
sí
and
tuve la desagradable
I,
experiencia
I had the
de
unfortunate
sufrir
experience
una
of
discriminación
being
por ser
discriminated against based on my gender because I was a
una
woman.
solicitud de trabajo
There
que yo había
was
presentado
I had put in an application for a job at a law firm,
de abogados de esas firmas
one of
prestigiosas.
those very
Fue
prestigious
rechazada por
firms.
ser mujer.
I was turned down because I was a woman.
No pude hacer nada, la verdad.
There was nothing I could do at the time
Como,
because
lo sufrí
I
me prometí
I couldn't,
que
but
no iba
I
a
suffered,
dejar
and I promised
más
myself
que me
that I would
discriminaran por
never
ser mujer.
allow anybody
Y no
discriminate against me
no volví a
because I am
sufrir
a woman.
discriminaciones.
And I
Sin
was
embargo,
never the
embargo,
victim of
es
discrimination
evidente
based on
que
gender
cada
again.
vez que se
However,
encabeza
it is
un
obvious
movimiento
that every time that
de los
there is
feministas, de los
a
derechos
movement,
políticos, de los derechos
feminist
civiles, hay
movement,
que
the
sufrir
movement on
la
behalf
burla, hay
of
que sufrir,
the civil rights of
tal vez
women
no lo hacen,
or political rights
eh,
of women. Of
digamos,
course,
muy abiertamente,
uh,
porque
you will
no
suffer,
se
maybe not
atreven ya hoy día, pero
overtly,
sí,
because people do not dare
recuerdo,
to just
por
speak
ejemplo,
out like
cuando
that.
una colega,
But people do
también
mock
muy
you
querida aquí en
and they
Costa
make fun of
Rica,
you. But there, I remember
defensora de los derechos
a,
humanos y de los
a
derechos de las
colleague,
mujeres,
very well liked here
dábamos
in
la
Costa Rica.
pelea
She was
por
a human
actualizar
rights
el Código
defender.
de Familia,
We were fighting
que era en ese
for
momento el Código
changes and
Civil
amendments to be made
del
to
siglo
the
XIX,
family
en
code,
donde la posición de la mujer en la
which came
familia
from
era
the civil code
absolutamente
of
de
from
discriminación
the 19th
sobre los
century,
derechos de los
and it
hombres.
was very discriminatory
Y
against
nosotras
women
encabezamos
vis-a-vis men.
esa lucha.
And we
Bueno, lo
were
que
the
nos
ones
dijeron,
who headed
nos dijeron de todo en
the
el Colegio de
fight. And
Abogados
what did they say?
y mismo en la
They
Facultad de
said,
Derecho.
you name it,
Pero
they said it
no nos
at
echamos para atrás. Es decir,
the bar association.
hay que decir,
But
bueno,
still, we did not
no,
cower.
así no es la
We
cosa, no,
said,
así
no,
no son las sociedades, no,
that's
esta no
not
es la
how
justicia,
societies
no,
work.
estos
This
no
is not
son los
just
derechos
justice.
humanos.
These
Y
are not
vamos a
human
seguir
rights.
peleando.
And we will continue to
Ahí hay
fight.
que ver las cosas que nos dijeron en Viena en el año
You
93.
should have heard what they said in
Porque
1993 in
decíamos que los
Vienna,
derechos humanos de las mujeres eran
because
también
they called
derechos
us name,
humanos.
because we said that
Igual.
women's rights were human
Hubo que
rights, just like
lograr
any human right.
finalmente que
So
se emitiera esa
it
declaración
we were
y
able to
sin
get
embargo
that
hay
declaration.
muchos
issued, but there are still many who do not believe that women's rights are human rights. But that's the fight that we have to keep waging. We have to keep waging that war and not be afraid. Don't be afraid. Do not let prejudice or fear, our own prejudice and fear, curtail our fight. We must always look up and look people in the eye.
Thank you very much, Judge Odio Benito, for your inspiring words. May we all heed your advice. May we all continue to fight together for equality, and may we find allies to work together with towards those ends. So thank you. Your remarks have been very meaningful to all of us, and we very much appreciate them. And it's an honor for us to bestow this award upon you. You've given us a chance to think and reflect on many important topics today, and we express our deep appreciation to you. We also would like to thank all of you who are out there listening to this WILIG virtual luncheon with no lunch included this time around. And we encourage you to check out the WILIG website to learn more about what we do and to become involved. Thank you very much. And that concludes our program for today. Thank you.
I thank you all. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to be with you and to share these ideas with you all, especially with the young people and especially with my friends there out there.
Thank
you.